Mr. Duncan Baker.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'll cut my speech down from the hour or so that I was putting through. It's a privilege to follow on from the Honourable Member for Cardiff South and Penarth with a very powerful speech and moving there. It has been a privilege to speak in the second reading and then into the Public Bill Committee and now see this through to the report stage, the first time I've seen the process all the way through as a new MP. I would say that I've always been interested in new topics to talk to my children about through bedtime reading. And so when my wife and I are both exciting accountants, I want to thank the Honourable Member for Newcastle-under-Lyme for giving me the idea of teaching them about mortality tables as something to now get our teeth into. But I suppose the real question is, how do we make pensions relevant to people in their busy lives and not to be put off for another year? How do you make them important to people to sit up and take notice? Well, I think you do exactly what this bill is aiming to do. You make them safer so that crimes against people's largest financial assets can be punished. And representing an older demographic in North Norfolk, where often people's pension schemes are their largest financial assets, I know that my constituents will certainly be a lot more pleased that there's now the teeth in the regulator to tackle these problems. You make them better, as has been said, and the pension dashboards really is a move in the right direction. It will really transform us into the 21st century because we then have the ability to manage something, and if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So a real step into the right direction. And of course you make them greener, and as I spoke about in the second reading, if you go into this direction now where pension trustees have to consider climate change as a materially financial risk for member investments, we know that this will help the entire industry as we move towards our net zero obligations. And I think if I can say just lastly, you have the leadership of a minister like the Honourable Member for Hexham, whose boundless energy and enthusiasm for this bill has got us to this stage, and I think we should all be commending his efforts and that to get us here. I'm just going to comment on a few areas, really, and regarding new Clause 1, I recognise why it is important, but I grew up under the mantra of personal responsibility, and I think that's a fairly apt statement here, because besides my experience of looking after the company pension scheme in the outside world before I ended up in this place, I always found the advisors were particularly proactive and open and willing to engage with employees about their retirement planning. I think there is already provision, information and interventions to outline the options. And of course the DWP recently published a policy statement which included measures on how to take up free and impartial guidance. On new Clause 3, I'm slightly tongue-in-cheek here, and I should probably be in trouble for saying this, but whenever the DWP bring in new procedures, it is always something of a slight concern for the average finance director thinking, oh no, what have we got to implement now in our businesses? And I remember the quagmire of going through auto-enrolment. That was something of some dread, but of course it turned out to be absolutely the right thing to do, and has been a monumental success in this country. We got through real-time information, and then of course I needed to avoid making tax digital, so I had to become an accountant. I had to become an MP to make sure I got out of doing that. But seriously, in my humble opinion, the more procedures that we put onto business, the more bureaucracy that we implement, especially at the moment, is something that I think our small and medium enterprises, which make up the backbone of this country, could really, really do without. We don't need further red tape and procedures, and the government is already dealing with this issue of how small pots can be consolidated as part of that further reporting, and I'm sure the Minister will make a comment on that in his summing up. And finally, as the MP for North Norfolk and someone who sits on the Environmental Audit Select Committee and who has, since his election to this place, alongside a quintet of Norfolk and Suffolk MPs, pushed to improve the environmentally damaging effects of connecting our wind farms to the national grid, I absolutely have to make a comment on Amendments 16 to 24. This is, as we've heard before, a clear case of the theory not delivering on the reality. What we need here is partnership between businesses and pension trustees to invest in green renewable technologies like the wind farms off my coasts in Weybourne, Sheringham and Haysborough. I'm sure parts of the country, Madam Deputy Speaker, that you have holidayed in many times before, and we will again, I hope. But not a set of restrictive governance criteria, which would most likely cause more divestment in green initiatives than a willingness to embrace and comply. So in summing up, Madam Deputy Speaker, this is a great bill. It pushes pension governance and transparency forward, not to mention investment in green initiatives to the next level. And I